that came from off the farm.
It was fall time in Korea. One of the only times of the year that my Canadian parents can visit, to avoid the scorching summers and cold winters here, as they have enough of those back home. We explored the entire country pretty much, starting in Jeju, which for those who don't know, it's Korea's tropical island, or their version of Hawaii, off the southwest coast. My parents were born in the early 1950s, in which Canada was one of the wealthiest countries in the world, as it was going through a huge economic boom after World War II. This was also right around the later stages of the Korean War, after which Korea had a GDP per capita of just about $67 USD. That's annual household income, by the way. It was one of the poorest countries in the world, so traveling abroad wasn't really feasible for most Koreans at the time. And thus, in the 1960s, wealthier couples mostly from Seoul began making their way to Jeju as their honeymoon destination, as it almost feels like going abroad, with exotic lava formations all over the island, stemming from Hallasan, the big volcano in the center. I think most people know where this story is headed, but Korea is now one of the most developed countries in the world, ranking 20th and basically the same as Canada on the Human Development Index in 2023, and I wouldn't be surprised if it has surpassed Canada now. Koreans typically go abroad these days for their honeymoon, and Jeju is becoming more and more centered around family tourism, or for couples looking for a shorter getaway from city life.
Martha, my darling, your name I keep calling. Heartaches forgotten when you...
If you've watched my previous videos, first of all, thank you. And you might have noticed I visit a lot of Buddhist temples. When my parents come to Korea, it's no different, as they both love them in their own way. So we decided to explore some of Jeju's best. Temples are usually situated in the most beautiful, quaint places in nature here, mostly on the sides of mountains, where I tend to go anyways, so it's pretty much impossible for me not to like them. I used to feel bad when visitors were being too loud or doing things they shouldn't be doing at them, which I'm 100% guilty of myself too, but I noticed that the monks living there often didn't react at all to this, passing by gracefully, sometimes even smiling and bowing to the people who break the most rules. I can never know how these monks felt inside, but their actions made me reflect a lot on myself. Before, when people did things I classified as annoying, such as butting in line, staring at their phone almost walking into me, or stopping at the top of an escalator blocking the way for everyone, my blood would boil, and I'd start to react and say inside my head, "You selfish I hope you And now you all know my true evil self. Anyways, I'm starting to think that this might not be the best way to go about it. There will never be a world where everyone is perfectly considerate of each other. So if I react with anger every time one of these situations occurs, some days could be pretty brutal. I'm not perfect or even close to mastering this yet, but I try to just wish people peace in all situations now, good or bad. And as long as I don't do this to stroke my own ego, I'm starting to feel a lot better as a result. We spent the rest of the trip here moving around like a pinball machine all around the country, visiting even more temples, and some amazing ones at that. Most people come to Korea to see Seoul, Busan, and Jeju, for good reason too, as I think that's the perfect place to start. But I don't think that many people know truly just how many things there are here, spread out all over this country, especially if you're interested in the culture and history. If you type 유적지 or 사적지 on Naver Maps, which means cultural or historical site, you see landmarks beside every river, on the side of every mountain, and in amongst every town. Wherever you are, always around the next corner. I'll never be able to see every place here, but I hope to share as many as I can through this channel to learn about and help tell their stories. We ended our amazing trip in style in Busan, and then it was back to midlife crisis mode. Now in fall time, trying skateboarding again. A sport I've always wanted to be good at, but usually hurt myself enough to give up for 10 years, forget, and then try again. This time my friend Nick is my partner in crime. I met Nick in 2012, my first time in Korea as a tourist at a StarCraft tournament we both went to watch. Back then he was planning on going back to America shortly after, but he accidentally inspired me to also become an English teacher. So I moved to Korea the next year in 2013, and since then, we've both been too scared to leave the other person behind in Korea alone. a game of chicken we've been playing for over 12 years now. Nick's daughter Ellen is picking it up really nicely too. Great job if you're watching, Ellen. But if you don't know, you have to fall over and over again if you want to learn how to skateboard.
Oh!
And now it's time to explain where the title of this video comes from. Great times, fall time, and times falling. When you're young, you can take these kinds of falls no problem and recover in a few days. As of editing this video, it's been over 6 weeks, and I still can't ride a bike or ski. Two of my favorite things I was really looking forward to. But to be honest, I want to be someone who doesn't limit myself too much because of my age. I met some guys in their 60s in the Korean countryside that had recently quit smoking and started working out just so they could mountain bike better. I don't know if they realize how much they inspired me, but both of them were definitely stronger than I've ever been as a 36-year-old. And I want to be just like them. Life will always have its ups and downs. And Nick and I already had a plan to visit Tsushima, Japan 2 weeks later together. I won't condone risking re-injury to anyone out there, but personally I'd risk anything for good times with friends. Tsushima is an island directly in between Japan and Korea with a population of about 30,000 people, and only takes a bit over an hour by ferry to get to from Busan. As huge fans of the game Ghost of Tsushima, Nick and I decided to explore various regions that can be found within the game. And although the game is set in fantasy, we wanted to get a sense of what it must have felt like when about 30,000 Mongolian troops first invaded Komoda Beach in 1274. Leading up to this invasion, Korea, known as Koryo at the time, was invaded 9 different times by Mongolians throughout the 13th century, leading to devastation, and apparently every single wooden structure on the peninsula was destroyed. Koryo ended up becoming a vassal state under Mongol for 80 years, and they were forced to help supply the Mongolian forces to attack Tsushima at the time. And these days, Koreans are the main visitors to the island, which are absolutely vital to its economy. This was Nick's first trip like this since having Ellen back in 2019. We rented a tiny old car that only broke down once, blocking the road for a tour bus. But other than that, it was amazing just to be able to explore around the island together like old times. Starting the first day driving down the East Coast, stopping at whatever looked interesting. I don't think most people traveling across the world to Japan would ever consider making a stop at Tsushima before the game came out. But it was my 3rd time visiting, and I'm starting to really like the place. We arrived at the largest city in the south called Itsuhara and spent the night at an izakaya joking around with some very friendly and very drunk Koreans. Then the next day it was back to exploring at the ruins of Kaneshi Castle, built in 1582 as the residence of the So clan, the same clan as So Sukekuni, who defended Tsushima at Komoda Beach in 1274. There are some gardens you can visit that were under construction, but the really nice worker there let us check them out from the perimeter for free. We then went to Panchoan Temple, a Buddhist temple built in 1615 by So Yoshinara of the So clan, which also happens to be featured in the video game. It was built to be a graveyard for the So clan, one of Japan's 3 largest cemeteries, with some massive gravestones surrounded by cedar trees that are over 1200 years old. And lastly, the Itsuhara Hachimangu Shrine, built in the year 677, and its origins are tied to Empress Jingu, an empress who ruled Japan from 201 to 269 AD. The shrine is right in the middle of the town. It's incredibly beautiful and serene, but it was unfortunate to see a sign explicitly stating no Korean tourists at the main prayer room. when it should clearly just say no tourists. There was a similar sign posted at Watatsumi Shrine the previous year in 2024, which has since been removed. So I'm hoping this change also happens at the Itsuhara Hachimangu Shrine. We went to see the Kaneda Fortress ruins as a finale, as that's one of the most epic parts of the game. But it turns out it's on top of a mountain that requires a pretty big hike to get up. My ankle wasn't ready for that, and we were out of time. So we returned to Hitakatsu up north, had time to sneak in a vending machine pizza before catching the ferry, and I was back alone in my van for the first time in over a month. And that was fall time here in Korea, filled with tons of good memories with family and friends, and some not so good ones as well. But that's a part of life. There are good moments and not so good ones too. I used to think that happiness was something that came from the outside world, from making a certain amount of money every month, or from owning a home without any debt, just as an example. I thought that if I could reach a point like that, my worries and anxieties would disappear, and I would just feel free. But after doing a lot of reading, learning, and reflecting, I'm starting to realize I was chasing the wrong thing. I now believe happiness comes from inside of us, and it's not a permanent state of being either. It requires constant effort every day, making the choices we feel are right inside for the good of ourselves and for those around us. These choices are not the easy ones either, or do they ever guarantee happiness at any moment. But by making these choices, I think we start to develop room inside. Enough room for negative emotions to come and go as they please, and for happiness to sit there comfortably. Not forever, but it tends to stay longer than it did when I made more wrong choices every day. I was off to the city of Daegu, Korea's 4th largest city, and one that for some reason I almost never go to explore. Most Korean cities of this size have pretty expensive parking lots, so when I'm in the van, I tend to avoid them for that reason. But I was in luck, as I found a free parking lot right in the middle of the city close to Busan, the mountain I'd be checking out. I noticed a bit of an older vibe around where I was in Daemyeongdong, with some storefront signs falling apart a bit, but not in a bad way. Whenever I see a neighborhood like this, I know that there will be a kimbap restaurant nearby, with a good cheukdeopbap, or stir-fried spicy pork on rice, my all-time favorite dish in Korea, and I happen to be right this time, to fill my belly up before heading up to the mountain. Normally I prefer to hike up mountains when possible, as it creates its own little adventure for the day, taking things step by step, out of breath for most of it, and bringing accomplishment when reaching the top. My ankle still wasn't up for the task, so I took the cable car up. I'm pretty new to Daegu, so before coming I simply searched what to do in Daegu on Google, and this is one of the first things that popped up. I prefer not to do too much research before going to new places, so I'm not even 100% sure if this is what people normally do when going to Busan. But as a somewhat newcomer to the city, I was in luck to stumble upon a very nice observatory looking out over the entire city. When I come to observatories, I kind of feel like Link in Breath of the Wild, looking out over the horizon, finding new places to explore. I knew I wouldn't be able to do Daegu justice on this trip alone, but it felt great to be completely new to a city in Korea again, especially as big as Daegu. Korean cities often look the same from far, but if you don't let that put you off, and open your mind to dig deeper, you can discover some amazing details hidden within the gray apartment blocks. This neighborhood of Dongseongno had me feeling young, so I decided to check out a famous local burger joint called Oily Burger. I thought it was amazing, and probably the best standard burger I've tried in all of Korea. I also think this is a good place for people looking for an area similar to Hongdae in Seoul, but where Koreans actually hang out these days, with a lot more old school Korean charm to it than an area like Seongsu-dong, which is also in Seoul. I wrapped up the day in the van trying to get some editing done, never really possible in the middle of having so much fun, and woke up the next day to some classy McDonald's, because why not, right? It was the beginning of December, and definitely starting to feel like winter. Also time for me to start making my way home back up close to Seoul. But surprise, there was a Buddhist temple I was curious about, and trust me, it wasn't just any temple. There's a mountain called Gongsan I've heard a lot about, the site of the Battle of Gongsan in 927 AD that resulted in the three kingdoms of Korea unifying shortly afterwards. And it's incredibly important in Buddhism too, being home to the Kappaoi stone Buddha, a stone statue that dates back to the 9th century, which I'll definitely check out someday when my ankle is better. But for today, it was time to visit Donghwasa, originally founded in 493 AD, and the headquarters for Master Samyeong, who led fellow monk soldiers during the Imjin War in the late 16th century. It's honestly the biggest temple I've ever seen, with different areas and prayer rooms everywhere, some housing for monks to stay at, and a big temple stay program where visitors can experience a lot of temple food as well. But the most interesting thing to me was the 30-meter high unified Great Buddha. Built in 1992 as a prayer for the unification of the Korean peninsula, just like it was done in the 10th century, and for world peace, right next to a massive prayer hall called the Donghiltaejeon, or Unified Hall. I truly hope for a peaceful conclusion to the conflict between the two Koreas. I know it wouldn't be easy, but in a world where things are growing a bit unsettling, it'd be nice to have something peaceful happen on such a grand scale. And who knows, if they could do it all the way back then in the 10th century, maybe it's possible today too. The video was supposed to end here, but I had the absolute best meal I've ever had at a rest stop here before. So save this one on Naver Maps, and hope you get the chance to drive by it as well someday, as it's really that good. Thank you so much for watching my video, hope you're all healthy and happy, and have a wonderful day.